Okay, so first things first, we want to go over the instructions. It will give you all the information you generally need if you don't know what you're doing with RC. So give the whole instructions a good look through, as I did, and that's when I found out the thing about the bearings in the gearbox already been there. Decide what gear ratio you want to use. For speed run, of course, I'm going to be going with the biggest pinion and the smallest spur. But if you're just bashing around the backyard and it's only small, going fast isn't going to help you. It just means you're going to be putting a lot of strain on speed control and the motor. And that's when you'd go to a smaller pinion and a bigger spur. So you've got that torque to take off in small areas. You'll get up to speed easily because you'd be surprised how much area these cars can need to wind out. Just give it a quick look over. It is a fairly simple build overall. That's all on the driver, put the wheels on. Probably the hardest part of this kit is doing the body and putting the wheels together, in all honesty. But we'll find out. As I'm going to do this is step by step. If you're building your first one for this speedrun challenge, and follow along and see what I do, as I've been building RC since these cars came out. Alright, so step one, we're going to use... Okay, so this is one thing with older kits. You will need to open all the bags because we're using bag A, bag B, the metal parts. Then here we're using bag C, bag D. So you'll have everything open really quickly. But we're doing the gearbox, the chassis for step one. Okay, and before I get into this step, here's just the lineup of parts needed for step one. And once again, it really pays to have a good pair of side cutters because there's a lot of solid edges and sprues to cut off. This is an older mold, so it was built back in the day and when things were different. There was a lot of cleaning up to do on parts with, once again, a good hobby knife as well. Really pays off. And another thing, I've shown this off before, but I'll show it again. When you've got one of these older kits where you have to open all the bags pretty much from step one, whereas the modern day ones, everything will be bag waste, will be for the first, 10, 15 steps, whatever. And then you'll go to bag B. This one, I've already used bag A and bag B. The next step I'll be using bag C and D. So this is just a little plastic tray. Actually come from like packaging to hold something in place. And I've had this for ages. I did have a pile of them, and I'm going to have to find something else soon because this one's actually starting to fall to crack. It's so old, but maybe I'll just tape it up. So anyway, just little hints to keep your build process smooth. And then for the metal bags, because they're fairly solid bags that have the staples that you can undo, I've just left the rest of the bits in there for those. And the other change I made, which surprisingly to me do not give you a measurement for cutting these foam things on the foam sheet that goes on the battery tray, and they suggest just one in the middle, but I decided to go two just to keep that left and right the battery so it doesn't rock, especially using a flat hard lipo. But anyway, I'll get this step together and see what step one looks like. Okay, one thing I will mention before putting this fully together is these big silver screws that hold this black bit in the middle together. Definitely use just a little dab of Tamiya grease on the thread, because even with the proper Tamiya tools, these are one of the hardest screws to actually install because they get a bigger thread, and also don't fully do up one and then do up the other. Do them both simultaneously. Also, I forgot to mention this part was needed for step one. Totally missed that because I was paying attention to all the screws and that. So that's H1. That's another bag that was opened at the very beginning. But with them in, I now have step one complete. The chassis halves put together. And I must say this is probably one of the hardest steps. Just getting everything to line up. These center braces, the battery door. You really need a third hand just to hold everything sort of in place. But got there. a bit of patience and care, you'll get there too. Alright, step 2 is building the uprights. And here's all the parts needed for step 2. Now this is one where you're really going to want to tighten these up good and proper. You've got the flange things there, but they do have a tendency to move. People do everything from welding to gluing these together. I'm just going to do them really tight with the supplied Allen key to get good leverage on it, and thread lock, which I know will make a lot of people cringe, but it's metal on metal, so it's acceptable. And there's step 2 done. I must say they went together a bit easier than I thought. And what I found the easiest way was using the Tamiya nut driver, or any nut driver that's the right size, was just to hold, once I got it tightened in the right spot, was just to hold that screw or bolt with the Allen key, and then to crank the back with the nut driver rather than trying to turn this part. And that pulled it in really tight, and it feels very, very secure. So see how long these last, as I know they have a tendency of coming loose. But that's step 2 done. They're both built. So step 3 is now putting on the uprights and the suspension arms and front, what do they call it, radius arm. And there's step 3 done. The arms are all attached. And once again, this is another step where third hand would have made it easier. Trying to get all this to line up the first time was really difficult. In the end, I found it easier with these screws here to put the kingpin, just to do them by hand to get them started. Because trying to hold all these pieces in the right angle and then screw it in with the screwdriver was just not easy. I've just left these nuts that hold the, what are they called again, rocker arms, just at flush, so they're holding on there. And then once I've got it all attached to the car, then I can adjust them until the suspension is moving how I, it's still there's no slop, but it's not too tight. Which we'll be getting onto that next. Step 4 is attaching the suspension stays and springs to the chassis. Alright, and there's step 4, all done. The suspension pins and springs are in there. And once again, found this easiest to hold the chassis sideways, put the spring in. I basically, the white little part that moves the spring, I got the anti-wear grease and just basically twisted the bottom part in that to put a layer around it, sat it on the spring, and then pressed down with the upright, or the suspension stay, that's what it's called. Hold that down and then put the screws in. Once again, third hand would have made it easier, but yeah, I can see why people were proud of these cars back in the day, because compared to modern cars, this has got quite a fair bit of fiddly bits to get through to make it work. So anyway, that's enough complaining from me. Next is step 5 down here, which is attaching our previously built suspension onto the chassis. And here's step 5 done, and that was fun. This side went together no problem, everything moved. This side, for some reason, put together the exact same way, and it would only get about that much suspension movement. I had to take all this off again. Just checked. I have a feeling that the white part might not have been seated correctly on the spring, so I was ripping it, but now they both have the same amount of suspension movement. So step 5 done. Over the page now. And step 6 is putting the screws on for these and the front bumper. Okay, so on to step 6. Need a bumper, the fiber reinforcement plate, and even though they don't say to, I just went outside and gave this a quick sand around the edges just to get rid of any splinters or that, as it is a fiber reinforced material. And you still see there's a little bit there where the hole is cut. I'm not going to worry about that because the screw will clear any of that away, but there was a few loose threads around the outside, so I just cleaned them up with some sandpaper. And a bunch of screws and washers are needed for this step. Okay, here's step 6. All done. Suspension attached. I'll wait and play with it a bit before I go adjusting any the nuts to tighten it up. And once again, these screws going in here to this black part on the nose, even this one, and these that hold the suspension on, put a dab of grease on each of them. You only need a tiny little smear on the side of the thread, because this plastic is quite stiff and it is a bit of a challenge to get some of them screws to go in easily. Bit of grease and all of a sudden they go in much easier. Alright, step 7. Now start the gearbox and assemble the spur gear and drive gear. So that's where I'll leave part 1 of the build. I did mean to get these out weeks ago when I built the car, and then things just got in the way. So as you know by now, it's fully built and running and done videos already. So I will continue the build as I've got it all recorded. I did want to do it in one long video, but it was going to be too long, so I'll break it down into 2 or 3. So hit that subscribe button if you want to see the rest of the build on this frog. Thanks, and I'll catch you in the next video. And good luck everyone else with your speed run cars.